Shadow of Rome is a game based off the ancient Roman practice of gladiatorial fighting. It uses a combination of action, gore, adrenaline and stealth to create an enjoyable experience for whoever happens to pick it up. It sees you taking up the role of Agrippa, an aspiring gladiator who's also trying to clear the name of his wrongly accused father. Now the narrative is really nothing to write home about, and it's within gameplay where Shadow of Rome really shines. Naturally, the main attraction is the combat that sees the player utilizing a wide range of weaponry, from swords to spears and maces, that all brings something different to the table. What makes it interesting is that each weapon has a finite life during battle. Once it's broken, it sees the player having to search the battlefield for something to use against their opponent. That can even result in you having to use severed limbs as a means to overcome your enemy. Another mechanic is something known as the salvo system. They're essentially sets of moves that excite the crowds and slowly fill a gauge. Once it's full, the player can call upon the audience to throw in a rare and powerful weapon that can turn the tide of a battle in the blink of an eye. The combat system soon becomes the real star of the show, coupling this with the impressive visuals and the variety of the gameplay, and what you have is one of the most engaging and rewarding games on the PlayStation 2. Ghost Hunter sees you taking on the role of a local police officer who is called to a school to investigate some very bizarre murders. Once you arrive, you stumble upon a strange machine and accidentally release tons of ghosts that were locked away within it. Now the narrative doesn't take itself too seriously, and as a result the overall adventure feels all the more enjoyable because of it. One of the first aspects that many players will notice though are the incredible visuals, most notably the facial expressions of each character that help portray this narrative. It really does pay off and manages to immerse you in the events that take place even further. Gameplay-wise, Ghost Hunter shares many similarities with Resident Evil 4. It takes place from an over-the-shoulder perspective and grants you the use of several weapons and items that all come in handy when taking on the variety of ghosts throughout the adventure. But it's not only combat that makes up the gameplay. Scattered throughout the adventure are several puzzles that require you to explore each environment extensively to locate specific items in order to progress. These moments mix up the gameplay well and offer a break from the somewhat intense ghost encounters. If you're fond of good action and survival horror, Ghost Hunter chalks up the perfect balance and offers a great experience. Now Dark Watch is a rather unique first-person shooter that brings elements of both steampunk as well as several western influences together to carve out something truly memorable, and a game that is shockingly one of the most underrated on the PlayStation 2. As the player, you assume the role of a man named Jericho, an outlawed gunfighter who works for an organization that's intent on bringing down the various supernatural forces that are looking to seize power. The main aspect of Jericho that helps him stand out from your various comrades is the fact that he is a vampire. Naturally, this plays a huge role when it comes to gameplay. Each ability Jericho possesses comes from this transformation and translates to the player being able to generate force fields, jump incredible distances, and also single out enemies in a crowd. Matching this range of skills is the amount of weaponry at the player's disposal. From pistols to shotguns and crossbows, there's an insane amount of variety to the gunplay, which soon becomes one of the most engaging aspects of the experience. If you never managed to pick it up when it first released, Dark Watch is still a great adventure that well and truly deserves your attention. Eternal Poison is a great tactical RPG that all takes place in a dark European-inspired location known as the Kingdom of Valdir. On the gameplay front, it manages to share much in common with the likes of Vandal Hearts on the PlayStation 1 and lends some elements from the Pokemon series as well as Fire Emblem to create something entirely unique. Each of the battles play out on a grid and see both the player and enemy taking it in turns to move about the field and carry out attacks. As you would expect with any game of this type, a huge variety of units are available for the player to use, ranging from archers and mages to infantry and knights. Each of them have their own distinct use within battle, and getting used to the advantages as well as disadvantages each of them offer is key to overcoming the obstacles that await you. Although Eternal Poison won't be to everyone's tastes, it's still a respectable SRPG, and if you're a fan of Sudoken or Disgaea for that matter, there is plenty on offer here that will likely keep you entertained. I've always been a huge fan of the Onimusha series, and just like many other popular franchises, it received a couple of spin-offs that presented the game in a totally different way, leaving behind the action horror and instead focusing upon an experience that shares more in common with the likes of Smash Bros. Blade Warriors is essentially a party fighter. Although it does attempt to offer a narrative, it's nothing even remotely compelling, and instead the gameplay is what really helps Blade Warriors succeed. It's an absolute blast to play. It has simple, easy to use controls, but there is however more depth to the engine than first meets the eye. With counters and various tactics that can be used, those who study the moves will no doubt come out on top. Items and souls play a major role in the gameplay. These souls are released from characters when they are hit or from certain chests and float around in the air until they're either absorbed by a character or completely disappear. They're used for a lot of things, from magic attacks and character experience to health regeneration and invulnerability. They all add an extra dimension to each encounter and further enhance the overall quality of the gameplay. If you're on the lookout for a solid multiplayer game, Onimusha Blade Warriors is a serious contender. E6 is quite possibly one of the most overlooked entries in the long-running series of RPGs. It once again sees the player taking on the role of Adol, as he and a group of like-minded companions arrive at a mysterious island. It's not long before they're all plunged into a tale that involves the fate of the entire kingdom, and they set out to bring an end to the evil plaguing it. Much like previous entries, E6 is an action RPG that sees its combat system playing out in real time. Naturally, Adol possesses a string of impressive abilities that help even the odds against enemies. Add to this the range of weapons and equipment that further improve your chances, and what you have is a truly engaging combat system that soon becomes one of the best aspects of the experience. This is no more apparent than when taking on bosses. At times they can fill the entire screen and require a keen amount of strategy in order to overcome. Now the journey is quite lengthy but never outstays its welcome and provides an engrossing and rewarding adventure for players to get stuck into. If it passed you by back in the day, E6 is still well worth picking up and giving a go to this day. On the surface, Zombie Hunters 2 is a really simple game. It all revolves around the player selecting from a series of characters and then slaying the hordes of zombies that roam the streets. Of course, in the beginning you will fight just common zombies, which seem dead not only in their appearance but by the way they fight as well. As you progress, the action ramps up to where you'll find yourself having to deal with crowds of enemies with a fair amount of sword tricks, not to mention some melee attacks and a unique ability, which can often be throwing knives, shotguns, or even ripping off limbs depending on the character that you choose. But it's the never-ending volume of enemies that will eventually weigh you down. As if dealing with a constant stream of zombies and other monsters wasn't enough to worry about, the girls tend to get infected by all the blood and general evil floating about. If you aren't careful, they can quickly go into a crazed, life-draining blood rage, and when you combine this with the somewhat clunky map navigation and intentionally stingy item drops, you end up with an odd survival action hybrid. It's nothing that's going to rival the likes of Devil May Cry, but Zombie Hunters 2 offers up a respectable hack and slash adventure that is bound to keep you entertained. The PlayStation 2 was home to a wide range of shooters, which made it one of the best consoles for fans of the genre. Now, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of this game, as I'll no doubt butcher the shit out of it, so I'll settle on Mush. Mush is developed by Cave, a well-known company especially when it comes to this particular style of game, and Mush only adds to their legacy. Unlike most shooters though, the entire game revolves around insects. From the ship you fly to the enemies you encounter, the little fuckers are everywhere. This results in an absurd amount of enemies and bullets flying around the screen at any one time. At points it will just become a blur of neon green and pink as you try to make your way through it. Mush is not a game that's afraid to challenge the player, and unless you have a firm grasp upon the several mechanics that are in place, you'll most likely only last a few seconds. It can be quite unforgiving, but like I've mentioned, once you get used to it and utilize each weapon and item available to you, it does become a lot more manageable. To help alleviate this issue, there are several difficulty modes included as well that add a nice touch of replayability to the game. Although it's not the best shooter on the PlayStation 2 by any means, Mush is still a great experience, especially for those who are fond of the genre. The PlayStation 2 was no stranger to impressive fighting games, with a whole host of respectable offerings, but one that often got overlooked was Fatal Fury Mark of the Wolves. It sees the action picking up 10 years after the events of the previous game, with a new roster of characters being introduced for the player to utilize, as well as several new mechanics that help mix up the gameplay and present something fresh. One of them, known as the break feature, allows the player to break certain attacks and throw in another one or any of their powers. It opens the doors to endless streams of combo possibilities, as well as infinites when it comes to taking on the enemy. The overall gameplay is tight and responsive, with each character possessing a string of basic attacks, as well as a selection of unique abilities that add a ton of diversity to the roster. Playing as each to find out which one suits you best is half of the fun, and can result in you stumbling into a new groove with a character that you absolutely had no intention of playing. If you're looking for a no-nonsense fighter on the PlayStation 2, Fatal Fury Mark of the Wolves has got you covered. Rygar is essentially God of War before God of War. It's clear to see that it not only inspired Santa Monica's popular IP, but in some ways it's even better. The entire adventure is loosely based upon Roman and Greek mythology, and sees you taking up the fight as Rygar as you set out to rid the land of the enemies threatening it. Now, what sets it apart from similar games of its kind has to be that nearly every object within the game is fully destructible. It soon has the potential to become an integral part of the gameplay, and provides extra damage during combat. It heavily plays into crowd control, as quite often you'll find yourself surrounded by enemies, with this strategy being one of the best ways to circumvent the danger posed. It's a really neat inclusion that helps it really stand out. What truly steals the show though are the boss encounters. You're pitted against them in giant arenas, with each of them providing something new and daunting to overcome. The challenge that each of them possess is a welcome addition to the otherwise simple gameplay. If you've yet to try it out, Rygar more than deserves a look. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos and to take part in giveaways. You can also join our growing community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters as well: Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve and Paddy J, for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining our Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I'll catch you next time.